Yep, next slide. So looking at next steps, our rollout options, we do know we have a few things to consider, particularly at our elementaries. We have summer camps and ESY at 2 of our elementary buildings that we'll need to work around. Purchasing and acquisition, once we can nail down a little bit firmer number on the boards and the particular mounting options that the teachers are looking for, we'll be able to place that order quickly. And we've been assured that the boards and the panels and the mounting equipment is all in stock and ready to ship.
So let's just take a quick look at the options that we gave to our teachers to consider. One of them was, do we want to roll all of these boards out at one time? Do we want to do it building-based? Do we want them to raise their hand and say, hey, I want to try it? And when do we want to do it? Do we want to do it in August or January? And do we want them to have the boards mounted on the wall or on a cart with wheels? So it was very interesting. The first question about, is it all or some who would get the boards at one time? It was a mixed response. However, as you'll see by that pie chart, when they responded as to when they wanted the boards, they definitely wanted them in August. So that sort of superseded the other option of when they would go out into their classrooms. And as far as being mounted or mobile, that was something that was up in the air as well. And we came to sort of a happy medium where the elementary and middle school teachers were looking at it in terms of, do we as a team or do we as a grade want to have it on wheels, or do we want to have it mounted on our walls? And the recommendation that we made to the high school was to use a cart with wheels in that building, and unless there was some extenuating circumstance in a particular classroom. So right now it looks like we will be moving forward in August. And of course, one of the questions on the teacher's mind is, and how are you going to show us how to use these boards? And we're going to start with the basics. We're really going to scaffold it and make it as simple as possible and show them this is how you plug it in. And this is what how easy it is for you to basically do what you've done before. And then if you want to write on the board, here's how you write on the board. If you would like to be untethered and walk around your room, we'll be happy to show you that too. But not everybody is going to be interested in going that route. So again, giving it to them a little bit at a time. And there's lots of wonderful bells and whistles that come with the board as well. And that can wait though. But if there is somebody who would like to learn about that on their own, we're going to provide them with some asynchronous opportunities to learn on their own as well. So basically, when we left school a couple of days ago, we did give the teachers access to some videos in case they just wanted to sort of get a feel for how it works. We'll do something live in August, and then we'll offer opportunities leading up to November where we'll do something live again. And with that, do you have any questions for us?
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. I think I'm going to start, if you don't mind, Ms. Peterson. I'd love to get your thoughts from the teacher perspective.
So interestingly enough, I was the classroom that they used for the multiple teachers, because in my classroom there are 4 different teachers, almost back to back. So when it came about for volunteers, I volunteered immediately because I thought we had so many issues in the beginning of the year with multiple teachers. Let's see how this works. And out of the 4 of us, 3 did a training, 1 did not. And so I am not a tech person by any means. And even I was able to pick it up pretty quick. And I was actually showing the person who didn't do the training because he wanted to try. And so the high school, we really enjoyed having the boards. We actually got the one board a little longer than a week, which was nice. It is a wonderful, you can walk around the room. There's the remote, which I love the remote. You can have the kids project from their seats. There's no need really to have wires. Having it be on the stand, you can move it around the room, which is nice because sometimes we like to work in quads, or we like to work, not just in rows. And with them being on the board, you felt very limited as to where the desks could go, because if you tried to, put them, let's say, facing each other or in little groups, you'd have to like turn and face this way. So at least having it on wheels, you can move it around the room. And Mrs. Glatzer said we will be able to move them up and down as well. I'm 5'3", but there are other people who are much taller. They might need it higher than I would need it. But what's nice is I actually at one point could sit in the back of the room and I was controlling the board just from sitting in the back, so I can see all their computers. I didn't feel like I had to stand in the front, buy this small computer cart and only use that. So to me, this is amazing. We've been waiting very, very long for this, so we can't wait until they actually come into the building. So, and I also volunteered to train the trainer, so we'll see how that one goes. So it's all good.
Yeah, no, thank you for that feedback. Does anyone on the committee have any follow-up or, one question, just very quick. Did you have a preference or did you get a sense of a preference for the cart or the wall mounted? Or?
We did not want the wall mount at all. Collectively, the high school, I think, was unanimous in not having it be mounted. It actually was nice. I needed to use it in another room. I actually just wheeled it. So I didn't have to bring, all this extra stuff, because you can log right onto the board and be hooked up to the internet. So I didn't even need my computer to use it. I just used the board. So the features that the board has in itself were great. Yeah, none of us agreed. We all wanted it on wheels.
Great. Ms. Duffy?
Is this the board? Okay, so it's big. Yeah, it's great. I mean, wake my students up, right? Yeah.
Yes, this
The
is,
sound.
this is actually
Okay.
smaller. This is
Oh,
65-inch, and the one that we are getting is 75-inch, so diagonal.
Okay,
And the sound is amazing.
that's great. And the only other thing, just because I was around when we were putting smart boards in the elementary schools, the smart run at RES. So, do they still exist? And was that part of the 4 that didn't go narrow?
Yes, that was part of the ones that we evaluated.
Okay. And what's outdated about them? Size or just everything like?
As far as the new boards?
Yeah.
they're-
Right. Yeah. No, not
Oh, what's
not the old
outdated.
boards, but why that? I'm just curious, like why they fell off that 4 and we went to.
Oh, gosh, that was a while ago.
Okay.
I have to think back. I don't remember exactly. We had a whole list of things that we looked at on all 4 boards before we narrowed it down to the 2. So I don't know exactly, unless,
So part of the process that we had looked at, it was to go projectors or to go monitors. Like that was the first big decision in there. The projectors, we heard a lot from people that's bouncing on the ceiling and creates bouncing on the wall. And if you think of the smart boards, they have a projector and they just reflect off of a white surface, and now you have 2 things, and then you're adding speakers compared to these that are all in one. And our goal is just make it as seamless as possible. Like, just get back to what you do really well, just do teaching and learning and not have to fiddle with all the stuff. So that became our initial narrow point, and then we had 4 products. Smart was actually one of the 4 products. They actually make a smart monitor as well, and that was one of the ones that didn't make it through the initial criteria.
Thank you. I thought it was pretty great to see a pie chart that had all the teachers wanting to get it as soon as possible. So terrific. Yeah.
Thank you. One financial question. It's great to hear what the taxpayers are getting for their $1 million+ bucks, and it's great also to hear that this was planned for. So even though we're taking out more than a third of the fund balance in this particular fund category, this was something we anticipated for some time. So there's no budgetary impact. All good. On the other hand, do you expect over the long-term adoption and use of these new boards to see increased maintenance or training or anything like that? What are kind of the year-to-year long-term budgetary impacts that may or may not occur because of this new idea?
So one of the initial, we'll probably going into even more granular phases. So our first phase is get these out there, making sure that they're working. Second phase would be any of the small add-on classrooms or conference rooms, or can we get an extra one in the pod or an extra one in the hallway so we can have one for open house? Like, we'll look at all of those. As far as the longevity of these, what we've seen talking to other districts and the vendors themselves is they tend to have a 10-plus year lifespan on them. And that's just for the technology itself. And we see that like with computers. We wouldn't put a 10-year-old computer in a classroom. These are basically large computers that, Ms. Peterson was sharing, that like you're interacting directly on the board with those. As far as the lifespan, they'll tell us, and they gave us a number of hours, and I don't remember what those hours were. They said you'll all be retired before they would even go dark. But it's probably the technology itself that would have to be updated. Just like our current smart boards, there was a point where we don't want to wait for them to die. That wouldn't be fair to our classrooms. We want to get ahead of it, just like we do with our other sustainability projects.
And this is more of a pedagogical question, but I'm still getting over the transition from chalkboards to dry erase boards, and these offer a great opportunity to use more multimedia, video in classes. On the other hand, students often come home and they open up their Chromebooks, and that's how they do their homework. It seems like there is screen time creep coming into our classrooms, and what is the vision for how much these will be used versus other ways of interacting in the classroom, so that pixels aren't on eyeballs all of the time?
I think a lot of our teachers, I think we dipped into this, Mrs. Dunn had mentioned it the last time as well, have been really thoughtful, especially going into this year, where we've been talking a lot about screen time with our screen time position statement and how often they're on devices, but how often we're using any sort of technology in the classroom. And feedback from a lot of our teachers would be, this would be on as much as our current projectors are on. So it's the same kind of screen there, but it does give you that opportunity to just blank it out. You also don't have to wait, they're instant on. You don't have to wait for a projector to slowly warm up. So as teachers wanted to transition far more quickly, they are able to do that, to just black out that screen, turn it off, turn it on, and be able to go right back in there and transition. So I know that that's something that they're thinking about, and especially at our elementary levels, they're looking at shutting things off and just doing physical manipulatives, doing things that are kinesthetic, just talking to each other, or just pulling in a group. There are a lot of days at the high school where we're just in a circle, we're having a literature circle, and we're talking. There's nothing on the board, we don't have any laptops. So to have that flexibility to be on anytime, any place, I think opens up new opportunities, but I wouldn't see it being any greater time than they currently have with their projectors.
Thanks, that's all, Dr. Babson.
I promise to be quick. In my head, there's a difference, eye strain, and I'm not sure one is better than the other, but there's a definite difference between this, which is the board, and what people in the watching can't see, which is the projector at the back. And I think that's dimmer, but it's not that blue light glow either. So I would just, and I know our teachers are really mindful of this, but it is something, my kids complain about how much they have to use their computers.
The boards do come with a setting that a teacher can go into, like not a dark mode, but a night mode, so that it sort of browns out the screen rather than you having that blue light in front of you.
Awesome. And then, because I actually do really think about the experience for the kids, and in the business world, I'm subject to lots of PowerPoint presentations. Is there a basic part of your training that talks to people about the minimum size font you should be using? No, I mean, seriously, because, I have glasses, so I have pretty good vision with the glasses on, but, there are fonts that get too small. And on the one hand, kids should know if they're having vision trouble, they need to say something, but at the same time, we don't want to cause all the kids to be going like this because the classroom's too big and the teachers didn't realize that a presentation is now ineffective because kids can't see it.
I would say not specific to these boards, but it's definitely something, in general of what is a high-quality presentation. One of the things that we try to teach students as well as they're giving more and more presentations. I would think that's one of the things to consider about the boards is it's going to be, in general, a higher resolution screen that they're looking at. So that might be something that you have to think about as you're planning things out and how you're going to display things. Similar to the Surface Pros that we have, the teachers can also zoom in just by touching the board. And the way you do it on your phone, you can zoom in and zoom out as well. So that's really nice, not something that you could easily do with our previous boards.
Okay, and then these boards, I mean, I see like a little pen attached to the front of it. So it's gonna be primarily used for some kind of pre-prepared presentation. No, you can use it as a chalkboard.
You're gonna get it right now.
And that's what I'm asking. I kind of wanted to see that because that's,
So I can go here, I can pick my colors, and
okay,
click right on the board.
okay.
Now, there's also a whiteboard application that is available here as well. That's a full-fledged, bring it up, I don't want to mess with it because Dr. Hand had set it up for our presentation.
No, that's
today.
fine. I appreciate it.
But there's a full-fledged whiteboard application that goes with it as well.
Okay, okay, thanks.
Okay, great, thanks. So with any new technology, I mean, my questions are pretty straightforward. My two basic questions are, what is this new technology giving us that our current technologies don't? And then the second one is even simpler than that, which is just a breakdown of its capabilities. And I think so far we've covered most of what those bullet points might be. But I'm just wondering if anyone could kind of volunteer to recap perhaps the main functionalities of this technology, and then also maybe summarize what this technology offers that our current technology does not.
So I think Mrs. Peterson did a nice job of that. One of
Yeah.
the key pieces here is the flexibility. Now, not all of our teachers are going to get the cart on wheels. Many will. So they have that ability to move it around the room and have a different front of the room anytime that they want to. We have the flexibility in that our teachers and students can wirelessly project to the board. So they can be anywhere in the classroom and present. That gives the teacher the ability to be side by side with a student and then draw everybody's attention to the front of the room while they point something out and walk to another part of the room as well. In addition to, of course, the beautiful visuals and the high quality sound with the board. So I would say those would be the main differences as well as the highlights of having a board like this. There are also, like I said, there are other nice tools that are built into it. Mrs. Peterson mentioned the fact it has a built-in browser, so you can go in and you can search the internet right from the board without even being connected to your computer. So there are nice things like that as well. And the whiteboard application that comes with it, there are so many things that we're still learning that application can do as well.
Great, Ms.
Can
Peterson?
I mention one more thing? I don't know if you mentioned this, but we can have up to 4 students project their own computers to the smartboard. So if you're in a math class, instead of, having, if they are doing their, math problem on their computer, because some of them do use their computers, we can have them project to there, and you can have 4 at a time versus, yes, you can use the Blackboard, I'm not saying you can't, but for those that, they've gotten used to using their computers and sometimes they're faster, you can actually present them from their seats. They don't have to actually get up. Now, I will say one math teacher is actually very much looking forward to getting the Blackboard back. So there are different levels of comfort and where people are. So this is the best of both worlds because you can use it and project, or you can still say, okay, you 4 go up to the board and do your problem. It's a nice balance, for all different teachers and what they're using it for. But the flexibility is hands down the best. The fact that you can be in the back of the room, that you don't have to be tethered, because that's really what the problem was. You only had a projector and you had to log on and off for every time you had to go in. It took at least 5 minutes, varying times. This you can just go right in and be connected or log off. You can also freeze their computers and we can freeze ours. So that you can freeze it on the screen so they don't go anywhere else. It really has a lot of features and we didn't even scratch the surface and we had them for a week.
Okay, well, that's excellent. I think between this presentation, your feedback, commentary from the board, I think we've covered this issue pretty thoroughly, so thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Back to you, Doc.
All right, thank you very much. And next, we're going to welcome Dr. Kearney and Dr. Wildlick up to present about our homework committee.
Good evening.
How are you? Good evening. So as Dr. Dukevich said, Dr. Wildlick and I are here to share with you an overview of the homework study we conducted during the second half of this year. For some background, this is the third study of homework that we've engaged in as a school district. The first was in 2013-2014, and out of that came the existing, or at least the original version of the existing policy and AR for homework. We started a new study in 2019-2020, but that one was cut short because of COVID. So this is a third attempt in response to the district's school board's initiative that they set out for this school year. So what we had said the purpose of this study was to review our K-12 homework policy and practices and determine if any changes were needed. And what we're doing as evidence completion is the presentation tonight, where we want to share with you an overview of the study, a summary of the findings, and a summary of the recommendations. More information about all of the work that we had done is also available on the website that we have put together for the homework committee, which met 5 times this school year. Each of those meetings was about 90 minutes long. And first, I think both of us want to offer an awful big thanks to this committee. It was comprised of parents, students, teachers, school board members, and administrators who were all very thoughtful about the topic, and I think very genuinely interested in hearing the different perspectives of the different groups, gathering information, discussing those, and helping form some of the recommendations that we're sharing here tonight. The first meeting was an opportunity for the group to take a look at some articles about homework and research into homework, to try and gather information from beyond the district about best practices and recommendations that research have come to determine. The second meeting was a chance to take a look at our homework policy and AR to get some preliminary ideas from the group about what do they like, what do they think might be some areas for change. In between the second and the third meeting, we administered a survey to elementary, middle school, and high school parents, elementary, middle school, and high school teachers, and middle school and high school students. And Dr. Weiler is going to review some of those results as part of this presentation. So at the third meeting, we came back and we had this group take a look at those responses based on grade level bands. Fourth meeting, we took a look at homework policies and ARs from some nearby and not so nearby school districts. And then at our fifth meeting, we took a look at a preliminary review of the findings and recommendations that were an earlier version, basically, of the presentation that you're seeing here. And all of that was incorporated into the work that we had done, although Dr. Weidlich and I met between these meetings and prior to this presentation to kind of review this information and work on it ourselves as well. I had mentioned the homework study webpage where there are summaries of these meetings, the name of the curriculum committee members, as well as links to many of the articles and podcasts and whatnot that we took a look at as part of the study. When we're talking about homework, we're thinking about any school assignment or studying that's intended for students to work on outside of school hours. And when we reviewed research into homework, there's a lot out there, but we did try to find some articles that were accessible to a wide population, as well as articles that referenced research into the topic. And as a summary of those, we came up with these bullets here. One of the prevailing messages was that the quality of homework is more important than the quantity of homework, that homework needs to be meaningful, and that the research indicates there's a relatively weak to no association between homework and achievement at the elementary level, but a more positive association at the middle school and then especially at the high school level. That there's the need for a balance. At some point, homework becomes counterproductive to student learning and well-being. You know, it's not a hard and fast rule, but generally between maybe 2.5 hours a night becomes counterproductive at the high school level. 10 minutes per grade level is a useful guideline that's still out there in the literature that we reviewed. We recognize that assignments don't take the same amount of time for each student, so although there are time guidelines, that doesn't mean that every student's experience is the same. And homework can serve as a bridge between school and home because it does allow parents to get a window into what students might be working on in ways that they don't otherwise. But at the same time, homework can place a burden on parents, particularly when students need more support or depending on the home dynamics, the various things that parents and students are balancing. And this brings us to an equity issue as well. Different levels of support available in different homes, so homework doesn't mean the same thing to each family or student. The question about purpose for homework came up. It's something that's in our AR now. We did take a look at this book that's pictured up there. This book suggests several purposes for homework. One of those is pre-learning, to stimulate interest in a topic before the teacher might engage in formal instruction on that topic. Diagnosis, to provide some information to teachers about what it is that students are ready to learn. Checking for understanding based on what's been instructed to provide teachers insight into what students have learned through that instruction. Practice, so that students can engage in learning some particularly rote skills. If done well, it can be effective for that. And also processing, giving the opportunity for students to reflect upon and perhaps connect ideas over a longer period of time, maybe throughout the course of a unit or even a full course. This book also suggested some characteristics of quality homework, that the tasks should have a clear academic purpose, that they should help the students effectively and efficiently so that they're not wasting time and energy completing the homework. It should have a positive effect on students' sense of competence, and to the extent possible, personally relevant to students so that they have ownership and feel some responsibility for the homework that they are completing. As I mentioned, we did survey various groups of people about their experiences with homework, and you can see a summary of how many people participated in each of those surveys. The student surveys were made available to them through Schoology. We had somewhat higher participation at the middle school level. The students were given specific time to complete the survey at the middle school. It was made available to our high school students, but time wasn't specifically set aside for them to complete it. So with all these surveys, oftentimes you get the people who are the most motivated to complete the survey are the ones who are going to do that. Teachers, the link to the homework survey was emailed to all of our K through 12 teachers. Parents, the link to the parent survey was posted on our website. It was included in the Radnor Reader, and it was also sent to parents through School Messenger. So you can kind of see the breakdown of the survey there. A number of the questions came from that research study where the front page is pictured there over to the right. So some of these questions were specific to our policy and our experiences in Radnor. Other questions came specifically from that research study on homework and the effect of homework on students' wellness in high-performing affluent school districts. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Weidlich to review some highlights from those survey results.
Sure. So just to kind of reinforce what Dr. Kearney said, so we had well over 2,000 stakeholder responses. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. And we focused on 5 areas for questioning: purpose, time, frequency, usefulness, as well as independence. And the questions were quantitative and or qualitative in nature. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak to bands for each one of those characteristics. So we're going to start with purpose. So from K-5, and this was K-5 elementary teachers and elementary parents were surveyed. And in terms of purpose, they were given 6 different options, and then there's always another option. And the highest percentage of responses are in yellow. The lowest percentage of responses are there in blue. And in terms of elementary teachers, they felt that the highest response was that the purpose of homework is to lead to independence or self-discipline in completing assignments, whereas the highest percentage for elementary parents was that the purpose of homework was to reinforce problem-solving skills and learning strategies. Lowest percentage by both stakeholder groups was to broaden, stimulate intellectual or creative development. So, and we'll go through this more specifically, or I'll summarize this more specifically at the end. And if at any point you want me to stop, just ask me to pause. So in terms of purpose for the middle level, or grades 6 through 8, same 6 options with an other option provided. The highest percentage among the RMS teachers was that homework is designed, or the purpose of homework is to develop or reinforce skills. Students is to expand depth of knowledge. That was the highest percentage. And then RMS parents stated that the purpose of homework was to reinforce problem-solving skills or learning strategies. With across the board, the lowest percentage in terms of purpose was to provide a feedback loop among teachers, parents, students about student learning. All right, and then continuing with purpose at the 9 through 12 level, the highest percentage for responses was to develop and reinforce skills for success or lifelong learning, and that was from the RHS teachers in terms of responses. Students and parents, their highest percentage was to reinforce problem-solving skills and or learning strategies. So they were the highest percentages. Lowest percentages, again, across the board, were similar to that of the middle school, whereas homework, the purpose of homework is to provide a feedback loop. In terms of time, this question again was broken down into grade bands. So K through 5, in terms of minutes per night, the highest percentage from the teacher's perception and then the parent's perception was about 11 to 20 minutes total. And then the lowest percentage was more than 51, and then 41 to 51. For 6 through 8, there's inconsistency with this question, or at least these responses. In terms of RMS teachers, they believe that they assign 0 to 15 minutes a night, whereas students 31 to 60, and parents 29% stated 31 to 60, and 31% of parents said 31 to 60. And again, they were the highest percentages. For lowest, you can see right from the chart, RMS teachers, 0% said 61 to 75. Students 67 to 90, as well as RMS parents.
Dr. Weidlich, could you just, if you would, repeat the question that the survey item is responding to?
Sure. So for this one,
Received, like,
Doctor, could you go back one question or one more? So this question was about time, the amount of time that that students are spending per night on homework. And as you see on the columns, we have assigned. So from the teacher's perspective, how much they assign, how much students are charged to do, at least from their lens, and then parental perception. So that's how that question is broken down. So from the elementary responses, again, let me just reiterate, the highest percentage was 11 to 20 minutes per night, and that was from the teacher's perspective as well as the elementary parents' perception. And then for 6 to 8, this is where I said that there was some inconsistency with what the teachers assigned from their lens to what the students believed that they had to do per night, which was 31 to 60 minutes, and what the RMS parents' perception was on homework.
And I think it's worth mentioning that at the secondary level, a student's obviously going to have more than one teacher, so even if a teacher's assigning 15 minutes of homework a night, that adds up over the course of a day for a student.
okay, thank you.
And then we're going to get into, for time, the RHS teachers, from their lens, they're assigning about 16 to 30 minutes per night, 42%. That was the largest percentage. And then from the student's lens, the largest percentage of minutes per night of homework ranged from 91 to 135 minutes, and then parents' perception was 46 to 90, at least the highest percentage of responses. The next theme was independence, and from the elementary band for independence, the highest percentage said that elementary teachers believed that homework can be completed independently by students most of the time, and that was 72%, where the perception of parents was that 49% of homework can be completed by students independently most of the time. So yes, there is some variance with those numbers, but they were the two highest percentages. In terms of independence for 6 to 8, right across the board, in terms of completing homework independently, 97% of the teachers believe that kids can complete homework most of the time independently. 67% of the students believe that they can complete the homework most of the time independently, and the perception from RMS parents was 64%. And then on the flip side, you have the lowest percentages highlighted in blue. Continuing with the independence thread, at the high school level, 90% of teachers believe that students can complete homework independently. 53% of students believe that they could complete homework without assistance, and the parents, their perception is that 76% 76% believe that their child or children can complete homework independently. And on the flip side, you have the blue highlighted as the lowest percentages. Now, this is going to be in frequency. So we had time, now we're having frequency, or the number of days per week. From the elementary perspective, the teachers reported, 79% at least, said that they give homework 4 days a week. The elementary parents kind of, they agreed with that statement. 56% said 4 days per week. At the middle level, there was inconsistency here where RMS teachers said about 24, the larger percentage was 24% said they don't give homework, or 0 days per week, where RMS students believe 5 and then the parents believe 4 days. So there was inconsistency with that. Excuse me. And then in terms of frequency, 9 through 12, at the high schools, 29% of the teachers give homework about 3 days a week, at least from what they stated. Whereas students believe that they received homework 5 days a week. 81% of the students responded with that, and 61% of the families, or 61% of the parents, said 5 days a week as well. And then the last theme was usefulness. So, how useful is homework? The elementary teachers had a couple different options, as well as the elementary parents, and 45% believe that homework is, in terms of usefulness, it is very useful, or it's very well. Elementary parents, 32% said homework is useful or somewhat well in terms of its usefulness. For 6 to 8, as you take a look at the chart, 45% of the teachers believe that it is very well, that it's used often, somewhat well, and somewhat well for the students in terms of the largest percentage at 47%, and then 41% for the RMS parents. And then its usefulness, 9 through 12. Very well, 55% of the teachers believe that their homework is useful. In terms of somewhat well, students and parents came in at 40 and 35%, which was the highest percentage. So that's a lot. That's a lot of information. So in terms of open-ended themes, all right. So for some of the for the qualitative information, in terms of parents believe that homework reinforces skills, including but not limited to time management, as well as certain academic skills. However, that homework can cause stress, and homework varies based on levels as well as grades. Teachers reported that it can reinforce skills in classroom instruction, that stress can be a result, and also varies by grade and course level. And in terms of students, they believe that it is reinforcement in terms of skill. However, it is difficult to manage, impacts extracurricular and out-of-school activities and or work, and that too depends on level. So in summary, teacher responses absolutely differ. We shared that from student and parent responses, specifically purpose of the homework, usefulness, time, as well as ability to complete independently. So there was some dissonance with that. Most teachers, students, and parents do not indicate that homework is achieving the purposes that are identified in the administrative regulations that we currently have. Approximately 15% of the students at RMS and 17% of the students at RHS report having more minutes of homework than the current AR guidelines permit. And lastly, 41% of the RMS students and 64% of the high school students report that homework always or often keeps them from having time with for family, friends, and other activities. So again, a lot of information that we just kind of funneled down to you. But in terms of policies, we took a look at other policies and other administrative regulations that are out there. So we just didn't look in the southeast region of Pennsylvania, we looked statewide. So we looked at districts such as Upper St. Clair, Upper Dublin, Unionville, Chadsford, Lower Merion, Great Valley, Garnet Valley, Fox Chapel. And what we gleaned from reviewing their board policies, that some of those districts, or some districts in general, don't have any homework policy. Or other districts' policies tend to be much shorter than ours. Language in other district policies and administrative regulations were less subjective than Radnor's, and that the committee, they identified language in other districts' ARs that we should really seek to adopt as we look to adjust our AR policy and our administrative regulations.
So the committee looked at all this information, even a little bit more than this, as well as our homework policy and AR, as we said, and summarized some of the recommendations. So among those are, with the existing policy and AR, and again, this is broken down into policy and AR and also practices, two distinct areas. To continue delineating the expectations by role, student, parent, and teacher. State that homework should not interfere with the health and well-being of the student, which is currently in our AR. State that non-instructional days are for restorative purposes. State that teachers need to ensure homework is meaningful. Reinforce the expectations that students receive feedback on homework. State that homework is in higher level courses should reflect greater depth and complexity. And recognize that higher level courses may have more homework, these are all already existing in our policy or AR. They recommend revising these areas, ensuring that the language of the policy and the AR is concise and clear, ensuring that the AR aligns with the expectations set in the policy, ensuring that the purpose of homework is clear and aligns with best practices, stating that the average daily time for homework should not exceed. There was some concern among the committee that the existing guidelines were seen as a requirement as opposed to a maximum amount of time for homework. State that K-5 homework time includes reading, writing, and math. Many of the committee members were surprised that there's a statement there basically saying independent reading, math, et cetera, are not considered as homework, so there was that question about what is homework at the elementary level. State that teachers of the same grade level / course should maintain consistent homework expectations. One of the things we heard from some parents was that they have two children who've had vastly different experiences with homework depending on their child's teacher. And similarly from our teachers, we heard that their experience assigning homework varies based on the courses that they're teaching and the levels of those courses as well. So there was some interest among the committee to have expectations that were consistent, at least by grade level or course level. Also revise the elementary statements that students should not miss recess to complete homework. Although it's discouraged, it's currently allowed in our AR. State that no homework will be given over breaks, but summer reading or summer assignments may be assigned. Require teachers to communicate homework purpose and expectations to parents and students. The AR guidelines should state that teachers should include checkpoints / a schedule for longer term assignments to help students manage their time. And then some recommendations for practice. Provide professional development to teachers about RTSD's homework policy, AR, and best practices. Identify homework expectations in the Radnor Middle School and Radnor High School program of studies to help inform students when they're making decisions about course selection. Teachers communicate the purpose of homework with parents and students at the beginning of the course. Teachers to communicate the estimated completion time for homework with students and their parents. Teachers should be flexible with students who have multiple tests or major assignments on the same day. And teachers should not assign homework during finals and midterms, PSSA, Keystone exams, or other AP exams. Not all these practices are new, but they are practices that the committee at least expressed as being important ones. Continuing with the recommendations for practices, regarding the discrepancy we saw between the teachers who completed the survey and the parents and students who completed the survey, the teachers should regularly gather feedback from their students about their experiences with homework in those areas that we reviewed to make sure that they have an understanding of, is the homework having a desired effect, not just based on student performance, but also what are students sharing about their experiences. And if not, do you adjust the homework? Do you help to communicate it more clearly for what those purposes are? But at the very least, try to make sure that our teachers and our students and our parents are having similar perceptions of what is happening. Students should communicate their experiences with homework to their teachers as well. And that schools should teach study skills to increase the likelihood that students use their time effectively and efficiently. So as far as next steps, this summer we are planning to share basically this information, maybe some that's more specific by grade level with administrators who haven't heard it already. And we're also interested in drafting a revised homework policy in AR for consideration during next school year. In the fall, we'd like to find some time to provide an update to teachers about this homework study as well as best practices so that they can help inform their decision-making as early in the school year as possible. We anticipate that we would bring any recommended changes to the policy in the AR through the policy committee late fall or winter of next year, depending on their agenda and what they're ready for as well as what we're ready for. And then, once that work is completed, provide an update to teachers and administrators for that matter, based on any revisions to the homework policy and AR to make sure that all of that's communicated out and teachers are aware of what any new expectations or guidelines may exist. So with that, we are happy to take any questions you may have.
Well, first of all, gents, thank you very much. I think this is a topic that is extremely important for pretty much everyone here, especially parents. I would like to actually invite a member of the committee who is also on our curriculum committee, Ms. Duffy. If you'd like to kick us off here, and then also Ms. Dunn's daughter, Jacqueline, was on there.
Thank you for all the work. I unfortunately was on the committee, but could not attend all the meetings, but the ones I did were very well.
I hope it was unfortunate that you couldn't attend all the meetings and not unfortunate that you were on the committee.
No, exactly, sorry, if I did not, yes.
The tape will reflect the outcome.
Right, yeah. I have a few, I was interested, I just wanted clarification. So if I'm on this is on the results of the research. So we were hearing that the middle school teachers were saying that the highest percentage, like 55%, were saying the purpose of homework was to develop and reinforce skills for skills for success and lifelong learning. And then we also had 42% that the purpose was to lead to independence and self-discipline. And yet we still had, I think it said 24% say that, so a quarter of the teachers don't assign homework.
And so I was taking a look at the time, and this is an assumption, all right? So if you take a look at the time slide, where it says 63% said 0 to 15 minutes. So I think that they're taking into account their specific core subject, right? And then I think that the students were taking a look at all of their major subjects cumulatively, right? So let's just if we were to take a look at 5 core subjects for 8th grade students, if they did anywhere between 0 to 15, that's where that comes in to like that 60-minute range. So that's why I assume that there was some inconsistency with that, if that makes sense.
Is anybody else following that? I'm having trouble. I'm just saying that if a teacher is saying that they recognize the value is to have, maybe it is about a teacher responding in a class that doesn't ever give homework. Is that what it could be? That their course is art and they don't assign homework.
Quite
so
possible.
that
I think
drives
you're
that
comparing
number.
two different surveys. I think that's the piece you might be, you're saying, why is it teachers say it's a lifelong learning tool and then don't assign it?
Right.
Understood.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
It could be different teachers.
Right.
Because I think what you're pointing out is that 40%, or what was it? Yeah, there's a percentage, there's a
There's a big
percentage who
percentage if
see
you do
the purpose
50
of
plus
it.
the 40.
But then there's a
Right.
20% who are saying they don't ever assign homework.
And I guess, I heard this from what has been my own experience as well as what I've really heard in the community is an inconsistency. So to me, what I appreciate on the recommendations is really trying to, the idea of also, getting more consistency across the board on what, our practice is for homework for teachers so that, and particularly within a given grade, right? So that we're building those skills together. And then also, I appreciate that the recommendation is that really communicating the purpose and setting expectations at the beginning. I know my own personal experience, when you're in that open house and you have a teacher at that very first day say to parent, this is what it looks like. This is what this year you can expect parents to have homework 3 days a week or 4 days a week. Then it really helps parents, particularly at the younger age, to know that, see if that's being reflected in what their kids say they're having to do. So that idea, I was happy that is the conclusion, but I think we should, work on that. And then the other
And
piece.
Ms. Duffy, when you're looking at that, to the perceived inconsistency, I guess a couple of thoughts. Certainly, we didn't hear from all of our teachers, so although those were the ones who answered those questions, it may not be reflective of the whole staff. Also, one of the things we did hear from some of our teachers was, although they may not assign homework on a daily basis, they may assign a longer-term project that they expect students to be working on over time. So we don't know exactly how a teacher may have answered those questions, or why they may have answered a question the way that they did, but it's possible that in the teacher's mind, I'm not assigning daily homework. However, I am assigning a longer-term project that students are expected to work on over time. So depending, they may have perceived it differently, perhaps.
And then I guess this is just more overarching that I think that in terms of, I'd be curious, and I appreciate that you defined homework as anything that they do at home, you know, when they leave. But I almost wish the title was "and study skills," because I think I'm just curious how the responses to the survey and where we went if we were talking about study skills, where if they would be different. Because, and again, I was happy to see in the recommendation that we're looking at, where is it, that we were talking about schools should teach study skills to increase the likelihood students time effectively and efficiently. Again, and I don't know if this is post-COVID more than pre-COVID, but I would again say the word that I feel on the street, that I hear in the community the most, parents talking, is that particularly kind of going in the middle school to the high school level, is that that they're not sure their kids are equipped. They know how to study. I mean, I've experienced it in my own house with some of my with some of my kids, that those study skills are lacking. And that's the one piece that I don't know we really specifically talked about, and in all these discussions is specifically the study skill component. And I also heard it in the Speak Up when we did, I went into academic, I think I've said this before, I was in a breakout group about academic stress, and I know the teachers in that group were even kind of put their ears up, like, wow, I realized that these students are saying they don't necessarily know how to approach, especially when there's multiple tests at a time. And that I heard a few teachers in the classroom saying, in that breakout, saying, oh, maybe, I know we teach some study skills in the health class, but really making it much more practical in each classroom. So I guess, I know this is aside from particularly what we talked about here, but I think one thing and maybe that's I know we've talked about executive functioning and maybe developing those skills, but that's one thing that I'm just concerned missing a little bit here, is more elaborating, because I think that's a big piece of what the kids do when they go home, and particularly in the later grades, and that is what they're developing to be successful with time management and study skills when they leave Radnor Township School District. And so I just would like us to kind of keep that on our radar for future consideration and what we're doing to, and maybe take a little deeper dive to see how our kids are feeling about being equipped to be prepared to be successful in the classes.
And that's something that we heard loud and clear from the students who served on that committee. Not just middle school students, but high school students as well. So speaking on behalf of the middle school specifically, that's something that we are very laser focused on, especially from that piece of feedback, so moving forward.
And I think it's been really challenging coming out of COVID because everything got turned upside down. So I don't think it's at fault. I just think that it's one of those skills that when I see my two children who went through without COVID, I feel like it just was a smoother process, and I really saw it missing, at least in my youngest, who was in middle school when this all happened, when he really would have been upping his game to learn those skills. Great. So, thanks.
Mr. Moore?
One question about the committee. I did notice that the meetings and updates are on the website. That was super helpful to be able to follow the one paragraph summaries for each of the meetings that occurred. Are there also meeting minutes that are more detailed than that were recorded but not posted, or do those not exist as well?
There are notes that we've collected from each of the meetings, but they're not formal minutes from the meetings.
Go ahead, Mrs.
Yeah,
Dunn.
I think those meetings were, an hour and a half, right?
They were
I
90
mean,
minutes.
Yeah,
90
they
minutes,
were,
yeah.
they were pretty, it would have been a big task to take minutes on that entire meeting.
And this question is in part for committee members who may be parents in the community. I think there is likely a real disconnect on the independence question. You know, how much is the homework that is assigned something that students can do independently versus need help from family members with? But I also wonder how much of that independence gap could be explained by parents inserting themselves into the homework process, even if it does not require their involvement for students to complete it independently. Does anyone have any local lore or impressions on that topic?
So I will tell you, I had the same thought, but I will also tell you there are certain topics that are great to complete over FaceTime. It's not that I, as a parent, am getting involved. There are 2 or 3 kids on a call discussing each problem as they go, discussing the reading, and what. I don't think that's cheating per se. I don't think it's anything they weren't allowed to do. I think they're genuinely helping each other the same way you and I might have called a friend without FaceTime when we were in high school. But because it's just easy, I think they get on, group calls sometimes to do some of that work. And I think the kids are being honest when they say, no, I didn't do it independently. I think the teacher is saying it can be completed independently. And I don't think there's necessarily a gap between those. I'm not aware that they're writing papers together, or I don't think of it as cheating per se, so much as kind of group learning, the same way you might be doing in small groups in a classroom. So that, at least at the high school level, that was my impression. I think at the middle school, my impression is you're probably right. There are some parents who are, I will confess, I don't care for Schoology. Sorry, I know the tech people are here. It has gotten a lot, I will say it's gotten a lot better. The teachers use it more consistently, but originally when I saw it, every teacher used it differently. I couldn't figure anything out. And I looked at my kids and said, whatever your homework is, you just better get it done. And I never looked. But I know there are parents who, through 8th grade and maybe even to high school, are checking every night, what is my kid's home? And I get that may be that their children need that support, and I was fortunate enough to mine. It was kind of a sink or swim. You're not getting that support from me because that's not my job. Your job is to do your homework and to know what it is. So I think there's probably my impression from seeing other people is that there's a broad array. And so I don't know whether it's parents are accurately perceiving.
Mr. Moore, you've covered your topics?
I do have one more question,
Sure,
if no one else had
absolutely.
anything on that last question. And Mrs. Duffy, I appreciate you raising the study skills thing. Just to put it another way, my spouse has, childhood mythology about having gone to some private school and having had 3 times as much homework as a kid than I ever got at Radnor, and how once she got to college, it was easy for her. On the other hand, now she's a college professor, and that's not what she wants the experience to have been for her students. The ones that she wants to be even more successful in college. She wishes that they had more explicit instruction in study skills and time management schools, and not so much this idea of, pardon this label, hazing about, the more homework you have as a kid, the more you'll be ready for college. What she sees is a skill deficit, and she incorporates study skills into her own pedagogy as a college professor. And if her students entering higher ed had that explicit instruction, she wouldn't have to do that and close that skill gap. So the more we do that, I think that would be better. It's not necessarily a replacement for thinking about the amount of homework time, but it's related to it. And so I really appreciate you for raising that as well.
So I'm trying to be mindful of the time because I know we have another really important presentation. So maybe I'm just going to make some observations and apologies if you feel it needs defense. And if you really want to weigh in, that's fine, but I just recognize I'm not trying to criticize. I'm struggling a little bit. One of the challenges I had with the survey to begin with, when you ask, for example, the purpose of homework, I think the teachers know what the purpose of the homework is that they're assigning. And presumably when they're asked, what's the purpose of homework, their purpose is both what they intend it to be and what they think homework should be. But I think when you're a parent, you can say, I wish homework's purpose were this. I believe it should be this. But when I answer this survey, this is what I perceive. This is what the homework seems to be aimed at. And I wonder if it doesn't seem like we asked that difference, because for me, I would love it if not only did it develop and reinforce skills, but if it broadened, stimulated intellectual creative development. Nobody picked that. Well, that's not true. Not nobody. The high school teachers, actually, that was a pretty high number. But it didn't come through for parents and students, and I wonder if they would have liked that to be the purpose, and it just wasn't. I also, and again, I apologize, I'm sure some of this is, based on policy and AR versus what was in the book. There was a question about, how well does homework help students learn course material? Well, there's a presumption there that that's what its purpose is. And maybe its purpose is not that, right? It's to reinforce study skills. It's not learning, it's reinforcing. So those questions, again, there was a presumption that I'm not sure everybody agreed that that was the purpose to begin with. So I struggled a little bit with some of those purposes. I also want you to think and I don't sit on the policy committee. I have not actually served on the policy committee in my years, but
Never too late.
but in part because I'm a lawyer and I look at this kind of level of detail. But one thing I want you to think about is when you say non-instructional days are for restorative purposes, one of the biggest things I hear is, oh, the teacher said we have a long weekend. We've got plenty of time to get it done. Oh, we have a Wednesday off, so we can get it done. Oftentimes, if we have a random Wednesday off, it's actually a religious holiday for a percentage of our students. That makes sense. But to me, Saturday and Sunday are non-instructional days. Are you saying teachers can't assign homework over the weekends? I'm not saying you shouldn't say that. I know I've actually been to back-to-school nights where there are teachers. There's a teacher at the high school, and I remember him so vividly saying, I used to always give homework over the weekends because I knew the kids had time to really dedicate it. He goes, and now I have kids, and I realize what life is like on the weekend when you have kids. He goes, and you will never get homework. Your child will never get homework from me on the weekend. If they claim they have homework on the weekend, it's because they didn't get it done during the week. I didn't give it. And I was like, oh, I love this teacher. This is great. But so I think you need to be really mindful when you say non-instructional days. I understand the exception for summer reading and summer assignments. One of the things I didn't see in here, and I'm sure you guys will cover it, is not just posting a policy and posting an AR, and I know in prior conversations with Ms. Kevgis, she's told me they've trained on this at the high school, but making sure teachers know what this is. It's not fair to post an assignment at 10 o'clock at night and expect the students to find out about it. And what's really rotten is when there's one kid who checks and doesn't tell everybody else, and so then the teacher next day can say, well, so-and-so knew about it. Homework has to be assigned. I think homework should be assigned in class. When I was a kid, it was on the chalkboard. I don't think that's too much to ask. And I understand everybody's busy, but I think students should have from one class period to the next to get the work done. And if you don't assign it in class, or certainly by the end of the school day, the students should not owe it to you the next. That's just not fair. They have obligations, you have obligations. And I think that those things should be clear in the AR, and they should be clear in the training for the teachers. I also, I wonder if we're putting a lot on the students to ask them to tell their teachers. There's a balance, right? I mean, there are going to be kids who take advantage and go, oh, this homework took me hours. And it was like a single page sheet. It obviously didn't take hours, right? It was a fill in the blank or a check the box. But I think you're also putting a lot on some kids to be the one who raises their hand and says, this took me too long. So I think we need to be mindful about how we're doing that. And teachers, I think most teachers have a pretty good sense of that. But I think we just need to be thinking about it. I echo all the study skills comments, and I'm assuming a lot of it was COVID, but I know a lot of freshmen at the high school who really will openly tell me, Mrs. Dunn, I do not know how to study for tests. I do not know how to prepare for this. So while Dr. Weidlich, I really appreciate you're going to hammer this in the middle school, I hope this is something we focus on at the high school as well, because I think there's a set of students we can't leave behind. We need to make sure that they're feeling prepared for the sophomore and junior and senior years, because we can't just say, well, that was COVID. That's one of those catch-up things I still think we really need to do. I want to say this is a lot of work, and I really appreciate all the effort you put in. The only other question that another school board member asked me was whether you considered at all a zero homework policy. And I'm guessing you didn't, given all the detail that's in here. But I just wondered if that came up at the steering committee meetings at all, even, at the lower grade levels where maybe there's a more perception of busy work.
It was a topic that some of the members brought up as part of their discussions throughout the committee work. It's not something that was largely supported through the other sources of data that we gathered. There was although there is research evidence that homework doesn't benefit students academically at the elementary level, there is a belief that it does help prepare them for, for some of the expectations of school, in elementary school and at the secondary level. And if we look at the open-ended responses to those surveys, an awful lot of our parents at each of the levels, there was some mixture. There were some parents who said we don't like homework or there's too much, and there were other parents who said there's not enough. I wouldn't say that that was the majority, but there were some parents who said that. So I don't think, yes, it did come up as part of the conversations, but it didn't seem to be supported by the larger, sources of information that we considered. At the same time, I think people felt that it was helpful if we were to say not to exceed, as opposed to the perception that some people have that there's the expectation there's a minimum amount of homework that students are given. So, I don't think anybody was necessarily calling for more homework, but most people were not saying we should not have any homework.
No, and I, from a timing standpoint, I think most parents, if they're honest with themselves, will acknowledge, my child has 2 hours of homework writing this paper tonight because they've had 2 weeks to write it and they've left it till tonight. And I'm not going to ever claim that that was really 2 hours of homework, right? That's not fair. So some of this is, asking everybody to step back and visit a situation carefully.
And just one more quick thing about the survey, just to keep in note for future. I jumped at the survey because, I'm pretty passionate about this topic, and the way it was delivered, we weren't able to differentiate within kids. And so speaking to that idea that, I have, of my 2 children right now at the high school, radically different experiences with homework, like radically, like in terms of like one working through the night and one hardly having any homework. So I couldn't do, I decided to pick the one that that one of them. I know, I guess there was an opportunity where we could have gone back in, right? I think I had raised this at the committee level, but there wasn't that differentiation. So I thought that was one of the flaws at the beginning of the survey when we put in the inputs, because we were picking to choose, we had to pick, which experience. And given that we heard that there were inconsistencies, I think, I don't know that we got a full sampling of really the extent of what's going on.
Would you like to respond to that, or Ms. Peterson?
Oh, I didn't want to. I wasn't going to respond. I was going to bring up another point about the definition, because I think it's a little bit tricky from a teacher perspective, because as Mrs. Dunn said, if you assign an assignment and they have a week and they wait until the night before, yes, it might seem like it's a lot more homework. So the definition is a little bit more complicated than just any school assignment or studying that is intended outside of school hours. Because what if we give them the class period to work and they decide that they didn't, I don't know, they stared off into space for 15 minutes? Then it technically becomes homework, but it wasn't assigned homework. So there are so many gray areas, especially on a high school level. And then when you factor in the courses that they're taking, because it doesn't look like the survey differentiated whether it's an AP course or how many APs or, honors or whatever it might be, those courses do tend to have more homework, because if you're, getting ready for an AP test. And I thought at one point we had those times written out somewhere for how many minutes. But I think that is something that we have to be mindful of. The definition can be a little misleading. With projects, just because it's at home, they were given class time. Did they use their class time? Like, I don't want to forget about that piece of the puzzle, because I feel like that's why there might be some discrepancies between what teachers are saying. I typically don't assign homework, but do they read? Yes. Is reading homework? I guess if I only read during class, we would never get through a novel. There's just not enough minutes. So I don't know. I feel like that definition might need to be played around with a little bit more.
And that's something that came up really quickly at the start, would be like, would reading or
Project.
Right. Was that part of the, the homework terminology per se, so.
Yeah, the survey did have demographic questions, including how many courses of different levels at the high school and the middle school level students were taking. So we can sort it based on AP, and we did do some of that sorting. As far as the definition, perhaps it's not perfect, but the intended for students to work on outside of school hours. So if the intention is for them to work on it in class and they didn't use that time well, then that may or may not be homework. How much did the teacher intend for them to put in outside of the school as opposed to inside? I think one of the overriding recommendations and the survey results, as a result of the survey results, was making sure that the teachers are clear on the experience of students, because there seemed to be a discrepancy. So if the teacher's under the impression that really this should be taking you 10 minutes or 20 minutes at night, and the students are telling us it's taking an hour, it doesn't necessarily mean the teacher is at fault for giving too much homework, but it may be that the student has a misunderstanding of what the expectations are, or they need more support than we're aware that they have. So I think a lot of it is just trying to make sure that everyone has a fuller understanding of each group's expectations and experiences with homework.
That's great, thanks. Did you have?
I was just going to say, the example that Mrs. Peterson gave is also another kind of reason, executive functioning, right? That's about time management, right? Like, that's about if you have 2 weeks, but you wait till the night before. So another reason why I think that's a good skill to teach our kids.
Okay, I could easily fill our remaining time with various questions and comments, but I just want to go through some hits. So my experience matches a little bit Dr. Moore's in her experience in terms of especially with undergraduates, and I taught undergraduates at Temple University, and I taught a general education course, and so part of the general education mandate was to actually teach them these kinds of sort of meta skills, these academic skills, so you're not just teaching the content. And so what I tried to do all the time, but I do this in my graduate courses as well, is I would talk about the purpose of the assignment and be very explicit about why this is an assignment. I might even talk about the development of the assignment or what have you, but it's sort of like when I when I talk to my kids about like table manners, there's a reason for it. It's not just like sort of arbitrary bullying. I think those of us Gen X maybe or whatever, it's sort of like because I said so. It's a different kind of mindset of talking with young people. It's a little bit more meta. It's a little bit more reflective. It's a little bit more intentional. So I think that that to me is an extremely important part of this, is to open up this kind of communication between teachers and parents and students about the intentions behind the homework. And that going back to those 2 slides about what the research says about homework, that there are some very clear reasons for this homework, and that it is not being assigned to lightly or sort of willy-nilly, that it is clearly aligned with curricular goals and it's thoughtful. Now, depending on your prep as a teacher, I mean, maybe you're using these materials for the umpteenth time in X amount of years, and you could wax poetic at length about why you're assigning certain homework. Other teachers, it might be a little newer. So for some teachers, this is going to be, depending on the subject matter, it's going to be maybe a heavier load. But I think that intentionality and that transparency, I think, the disparities, I think, between the perceptions across different stakeholders was something that I think could be or might be required knowledge for every parent in this district, in the sense that to open up this conversation, because it is a major part of a young person's life in our district. And some points have already been brought up about expectations about free time, et cetera. One final thing is that I think that the wording is important as well. So for example, this is just a sort of professorial pet peeve, but the word meaningful, it's one of my least favorite words actually, because it doesn't really mean anything. So make sure that maybe it's just a personal quirk, but I mean, like, unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by meaningful? Maybe be a little bit more detailed. But I think just that general idea of being more detailed, being more intentional, and just communicating more of those purposes we've already gone through the research stuff, but I mean, quality over quantity, I mean, that's a huge, but again, I could talk for a while about this, but I think that the importance of this study is not lost on any of us here. I think that we're all really grateful that you guys, that as a collective are doing this work. One final point, I just want to maybe recognize Ms. Peterson and our teaching staff, which is that teacher autonomy is very important. It's very important for a teacher to be able to assign the kind of homework that aligns with not only the curricular goals and the standards and all that, but how they want to do it as teachers. It's part of their professional autonomy, right? So I think that there's a conversation there about aligning autonomy with goals and then also clear communication. Gone are the days when it's just sort of like, here's the homework, do it. I mean, that's a style. I get it. I have to do it sometimes too. But I think that we can probably take this to the next level, which I think this study kind of lays the groundwork to do. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Thank you. And thank you to Dr. Kearney and Dr. Wildlick. They've put a great deal of time and effort into facilitating this entire process and all of the findings. And as they shared on their next step slide, there is much more to come. So this conversation is really probably just the beginning of a lot more. So thank you both.
Thanks again.
And for our final piece of our meeting tonight, I'm going to welcome the 3 members of our high school administrative team to the front now, Ms. Kevkis, Ms. Manukian, and Ms. Rains, to share with you an update on our consolidation of academic levels at the high school. And as they find their seats, I just wanted to, the nameplates are there in the center if you'd like to choose yours for the holder there. Yeah, any name you like. Just quick context as they find their way is this is the culmination of year 2 of a planned 5-year consolidation. Just to give context, we are far from any type of finish line, and even at year 5, still there's no finish line. So just to provide context as we turn it over, and the clicker might still be up there, or maybe not. Oh, there. So you could transition as you wish for this one. All right.
Thank you and welcome.
The floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having us tonight. We know that everyone has waited a long time to hear this update, and so we are excited to be here and present it to you. As Dr. Dukevich said, it is certainly not our last presentation, right? It is an ongoing effort that we will continue to keep a close eye on and update the board with over the next couple of years. Our teachers have done a phenomenal job so far and have worked harder than I can possibly express. And they will continue to do so, I know, because they are the teachers that they are. And we're here to share some of the work that we've done over the past 2 years. And again, knowing that there's more work to do. So I'm going to start off by quickly, since we are a little short on time, looking at the agenda. So we'll talk about very, very briefly how we got here, right? A little bit about the history of how we came to consolidate the academic levels, the elements of year 1, our findings and next steps. We'll do the same thing for year 2. We'll look at some of the data before and after the consolidation of levels, and then we will look at a summary, some of the successes that we've seen and some of the challenges that remain, and then hopefully we will have time for some questions. On the next slide, we have our guiding principles, the vision and core values of the district, and this is just to remind all of us that whenever we put a program in place, designing it, creating it, that we always like to keep these 2 things in mind because they are so important to make sure that they are guiding us through the process. Consolidation of academic levels, if you take a look as the centerpiece, it aligns very nicely with all of our district goals and initiatives, including MTSS, which we've developed specifically at the high school over the past couple of years, the study outcomes from the Radnor Middle School study, diversity, equity, and inclusion, our goal to challenge and support all students, our mission and vision, and of course our college and career readiness with the overhaul of our school counseling department and how all of those different pieces tie together. On the next slide, this was actually in the first presentation we ever gave about the consolidation of academic levels, and it showed the progression, how we go from 1 grade level at elementary to 2 to 4 at the high school, and how this was part of the plan and rationale. So if you take a look at that next slide, right, our main goal was to challenge and support all students while maintaining high expectations. And this is something that we have consistently said to our teachers over and over, that as we move to consolidate this level, or the levels, we don't expect the rigor to change. Close the opportunity and achievement gaps. That certainly is a close second to maintaining our high expectations. Improve alignment with the groupings of students at Radnor Middle School. So why were we have 2 levels at the middle school. How do we go from 2 to 4? And does that make sense? And then finally, one of the nice byproducts of the consolidation is reducing scheduling conflicts. A lot of our CP courses were singleton courses, which means we only ran 1 section. So by eliminating those sections, it allows us to reduce conflicts for students who may need additional support and didn't have time in their schedule to necessarily take electives and other courses that they may like to. On the following slide, just a quick timeline of events all the way back to 2015, when we really started to have a focus on DEI in the district, to today. One of the things that you will want to note is, we had our ELP program come into play in 2018, 2019. Next year, we'll be going into our 6th year with the ELP. It started as core subjects only, and now we cover not just core. We have world language, which we technically think of as a core, but we also have study skills, to your point, Mrs. Duffy, and tutors who can work on that, and executive functioning skills. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, because I know that
But
that's...
ELP is, I mean, we know what ELP is.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, we love our acronyms, don't we? ELP is our extended learning program. So again, we do cover more than we initially had in place. In 1920, we put the freshman mentor program in place, and that will grow as well, especially with Mrs. Seymour in place as our 9th grade counselor next year. She will do a phenomenal job, and she is very excited about expanding upon the transition piece. In 2020, 2021, this is when we really began the planning, and then we have year 1 and year 2. The next slide is a little bit different. It's a timeline as well, but it shows you how it was a very deliberate, slow rollout of the consolidation, where in 21, 22, we only looked at 9th grade and we only looked at English and social studies. This past year, we looked at 9th and 10th grade in the humanities. So we had 2 levels and 2 core subjects. And we also looked at curriculum and changed it for math and science, in the respect that we've always had a course for those not on grade level, science and the environment in 9th grade, in science again, and then in math, we have intro to algebra. Both of those courses, right, did not just simply change a label and become intro to algebra advanced from intro to algebra college prep, nor did science and the environment CP or college prep just simply become science and the environment advanced. We looked at the curriculum. We looked and saw how can we make it more challenging, what can we include, and so introduction to algebra had a greater breadth of material that was covered, more chapters, so that the students would be better prepared when they moved to Algebra 1 that next year. Science and the environment, which was intentionally put back in the program of studies to address reading levels for students that would go into biology, was expanded upon in terms of their curriculum, so that students were looking at biology at the end of the year in that last quarter to really start getting into the mode of thinking in terms of that type of science. So that would be a change for this year as well. Next year will be 9 through 11 for the humanities, 9 through 10 for math and science, and that will be our first year looking at algebra and biology and science and math. And you can see how the progression continues. If you take a look on the next slide, we're getting into year 1, and with that, I will turn it over to Mrs. Rains.
Wondering which button you
Oh,
press.
this one.
Oh. I'm sorry. So I will say the initiative, the consolidation initiative, is definitely a collaborative effort with all of us. We worked with central administration, our administration, the teachers, the paraprofessionals on developing what we have so far. So what you're going to see on this slide is that there's a lot of perspectives then that also are taken into consideration. Views on what's important to knowing if this is working. So during the first year, the schedulers purposefully gave our social studies and our English departments for ninth grade classes a common prep period. This gave them a time to collaborate with each other and also for us to meet. So we met at least every other week. At the beginning, we started meeting every Friday so that we could really keep tabs on how this was going and supporting our students. What we ended up doing is kind of using a basic model of MTSS. The teachers would come, they would share some challenges that they had, either students that needed a little bit more support or students that were really doing well and they needed to challenge a little bit more in that advanced class to prepare them for an honors level class. And as a team, we would talk about what we could be doing to helping those students while in class. The data team also had off that second period to work together, so they were able to support us. And then we found that creating a collaborative resource place in Schoology for our teachers teaching this class really helped as far as modifying the amount of time they needed to then spend on modifying different lessons to support our teachers. That is really an area that this consolidation has impacted because it's the preparation for all of the students in the classes that takes up a lot of time. We do know, though, that academics are not generally impacted in isolation. So we looked at our students, their grades, their attendance, any overrides or underrides, if they had been recommended for a SAP program through a referral, the number of discipline referrals that they had as well. What we found is that we had plenty of perspectives from adults, but needed some student perspectives. So we interviewed students. We took kind of like a cross-section that would represent the students that were in our advanced level class and interviewed them individually. There's a book, it's called Street Data, and we modeled that formula that they have. We also found that in our conversations with the teachers, skill and will came up over and over again. Is it that the students don't have the skills to be successful in class, or is it that they're just not doing their homework, or their time management? So what we decided to do was, well, impact our students and let them know what we were looking for from the beginning, but also hear a little bit about them. So we sent out, it's called My Story, and it is a reflection that the 8th grade students did, self-reflection, optional of course, but it was a survey where they could then give us some feedback about who they were so the teachers could prepare for them when they came into 9th grade. So the S stands for strengths. So we took those skill sets, right? Is your time management good? How are you with technology? Public speaking? Do you keep focus? T was tendencies. How do you like to learn? Are you great in a group, small group, one-on-one, independently? Opportunities, what makes you excited about class? So now the teachers know this group of students that's sitting in front of me, they love hands-on experiences. So as I create my lesson as a teacher, that's something I'm going to focus on. Resources was the R, meaning who can you reach out to if you need help? This really helped us gain perspective on the kids that were coming in. There were a few students who really didn't feel like they had someone. That list of students was shared with our guidance department so that we could wrap our arms around them right away. And then yearning. What else do you want us to know about you? We really have a group of people to thank for this next slide, because this is what we decided to do moving forward. This is like, this is a terrible analogy, but I'm going to use it anyways. You know, you go to the store and you look for that one-size-fits-all outfit, and you get it, and no matter how many times I find a one-size-fits-all dress, it never fits my sister the same way. She's 5'2". But you can go ahead and you can find the right accessories, the right safety pins, and you can make that dress look good on anyone. That's what we needed to do for this consolidation program. And our teachers and our administrators have done a great job at just doing that. So the first thing, we knew that we needed to address some of the reading levels, especially in social studies, because our classes are a little different there than they are in, say, your language arts as far as supports. Communication couldn't be more essential. That collaboration time was so important. And it's not just important for the teachers that are teaching the same core content, but also for teachers and, say, case managers, like our special ed teachers, paraprofessionals that are pushing in, parents, having them be part of this discussion, and also the students. We cannot forget that they are the ones that are sitting there needing to do the work and or needing to go up to the teacher to say, hey, I totally get this and I want to learn more. We emphasized the qualities of a learner because that's what our 9th grade students were coming in from the middle school with, right? That was one of their initiatives that they did. So we focused on flexibility, collaboration, creativity, persistence, problem solving, and self-advocacy. Because after talking to our teachers, those were the 6 things that needed to be focused on the most. What we did was we made them a focus during our freshman fundamentals and also during that transition day. So the students knew right from the beginning, these are things that you need to know. We were going to implement MTSS for the following year, and of course, that collaboration with the middle school is so important. Year 2, that would be this year. Once again, we focused on the same things as last time, like the first year that we did this, but there was a little bit more because now we were also incorporating the math and sciences. We had 6 classes, or 6 courses, I should say, then to go ahead and keep reflecting on instead of the 2 humanities from the year before. So in year 2, we needed to create, or we wanted to create, some time built into the student's day for that academic support. It's important. So we have lunch and learn 2 days out of our week for the students to do just that. We also gently clustered 2 to 3 sections for students. We gently clustered students in 2 to 3 sections so that we could provide some additional support. And we did that through a special education teacher and or a paraprofessional. MTSS got up and running so that we could start to identify our students who needed some more academic support. And then, of course, we continued that communication with the expectations for the high school from the middle school. The middle school uses a teach-reteach model for one of their advisory courses. And so we did something kind of similar with our Algebra 1 Foundations course this year. And that's in preparation for next year when our students will be taking the Algebra 1 Advanced level class. We also have put into place some foundations courses for geometry and Algebra 2. So we're really preparing for the math support that our students will need with this change. We also realized that we have some students that are coming more regularly. There are students that are coming from out of district that do not have the developmental math skills that are foundational for even intro to algebra. And so that is a course that we have created and put into place in the program of studies for this upcoming year. We had meetings with an inclusion coach for all of the teachers in the consolidated classes. Anytime you are a teacher, you know that you are continuously refining your instructional skills, right? It's a craft that takes a long time to get to perfection. So differentiated instruction is a way for us to do that, especially you can use differentiated instruction in any level course. We had implemented some resources, IXL, for example, in social studies, because it does help with that reading difference that you'll find in some classes. Our administration held department meetings so that we could continue to get feedback not just from the teachers that are teaching these courses, but from the department as a whole. And then we had our central administration come in and observe some of the classes at the advanced level and provide feedback for the teachers.
All right, I'm going to pass it over to Ms. Manukian, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the data.
Thank you. Thank you. Coupled with the action steps that Mrs. Raines just discussed, we've also been tracking some data. What's highlighted in yellow is what's going to be coming up in the following slides. We're going to be discussing the enrollment in the academic levels. We're going to be discussing the end-of-year grades and the SAP referrals. So the following 8 slides, it's going to be the 9th grade English enrollment, the numbers in the honors, the numbers in advanced, and the numbers in CPs, and then also the end-of-year grades. We're going to do that for 9th grade English, 9th grade social studies, 10th grade English, and 10th grade social studies. So looking at this first chart, and I know it appears small up there, it looks like, and I see you have it in front of you. There's a number of factors that we looked at looking at this chart. So what you see here is we've gathered data in enrollment of our English 9 honors classes, advanced classes, and the CP classes in the fall of 2017. What did it start with? the fall of 2018, 19, 20, 21, and 22 as well. So we have the enrollment numbers, and just looking at these, a few things that have popped out to me as I've been looking over the data. This is the former math teacher in me. Looking at the band of the honors, I just wanted to point out not only the numbers, but also the percentages of the ninth grade class that were in those. Most of them were in the 30% range. We have 31% in 2019, 32% of our ninth grade students was in 2020. There was a drop in 21. It went down to 27%, and it went back up to the 30s, 36% the last year, the 22. I tried figuring out why did we go from 31, 32, down to 27%. You see that 73 over there, and then back up to 36%. The 27% reflects we offered 2 integrated courses that year. So I'm thinking some took honors and some jumped up to the integrated courses because there was higher enrollment in those integrated courses. So 27%. That was my explanation for it. And then it jumped back to normalization in the 30s. And looking at the advanced, in 2019, it was 40% of our students were in the advanced classes, 45%, a jump up now to 51%, so now we're in the 50s, and then back to normalization at 45%. That's the year that our consolidation of academic levels courses happened, and so I'm assuming it went from 45% to 51% because now that's the first time we're seeing the CP kids now enrolled in those classes, so we have higher numbers. Also, in the year 2020, we had an increase of about 40 students in our ninth grade class, and you see it went from 73 students up to 96, and 107 to 137. And so I'm thinking it's because we had an increase of 40 students in that particular ninth grade class. And now we have the end of year grades for those ninth grade English courses. The way that I had gathered the data, I looked at 2017 to 2018, 2018 to 2019, end of year average grades. I did not compute our COVID year. I think the grades on that year could be sort of subjective based on the teacher and the trauma that the students went through that year. And then the last 2 years, 2020, 2021 to 2021, 2022. We do not have this current school year end of year grades because they're due this Friday. So I will be collecting that data, but I don't have any of it because the teachers are going to be turning it in by this Friday. So just looking at the delta in our honors classes pre-COVID and pre-consolidation, you see we went up 1.26%. And then post-COVID and post the beginning of our consolidation, the honors still went up. It went up still 1.15%. Looking at the advanced classes, pre-COVID, it went up 0.51%, and post-COVID, and at the start of consolidation, it did drop to 0.07%. I'm curious what this year's end of grades are going to be. I actually can't wait for Friday to come in so that I can gather the data and start inputting it in. Now, ninth grade social studies enrollment. Looking at the enrollment in the honors classes, they were all in the 30s. 35% of our students in 2019 were in our honors, 32%, followed with 34%, and following with 39%. So while there's drops and highs, it was all in the 30% in that one. Looking at our advanced, in 2019, it was 44% of our students. Although there was a big increase from 118 students to 142 students, the 44% went up to 49%. Again, 2020 is when we had that enrollment in the ninth grade numbers increase. And then it was 48% and 50%. So that range was just about 6% for those years. Now we'll go to the end of year grades for those ninth grade social studies classes. And again, we don't have this current school years because they're due this Friday. You'll see the delta on honors classes pre-COVID and pre-consolidation went up 0.43%. Post-COVID and post-consolidation in our honors classes, it dropped about 2%. You'll see an increase in 2017 to 2018 in our advanced classes, a little bit under 3%, and there's still a little bit of an increase, 0.1%, after COVID and after our consolidation. Now we're in 10th grade English enrollment. Again, in 2020, we had 2 integrated classes. So it went from 121 students the year before, and it dropped to 103 students. That was the year that we had our 2 integrated classes. Looking at the 95, jumping up to the 111, that is a jump in numbers. However, the percentage was 47% of our students. That reflects the 95 students. The following year, our 111 students were 46%. So went from 47% to our students were in honors, and now 46% of our students in honors. It seemed very normalized. Looking at the advanced, the 107 was 35% of our students, and it raised up to 41% of our students, reflecting the 117, and that can be because now CP was canceled and those kids were in our advanced classes. And then the English end of year grades. You see the deltas increased through our honors, comparisons pre and post-COVID, and in our advanced. And again, I'm looking forward to Friday getting the data for this year to see how it goes. And then, if I could turn this, we're in our 10th grade social studies enrollment. We see that 65, that drop. Again, that's the year that we had our 2 integrated courses. And I thought something that was interesting, the last 2 years in our World Studies Advanced, it was 27% and 28% of our students. Another thing to point out outside of the 2020 having our 2 integrated classes, in social studies, we have to be reminded we also offer AP World. In English, there isn't a 9th grade option or a 10th grade option for AP, but in our social studies there is. There's 3 sections consistently through all these years that we had AP World. This last slide here, we have on enrollment, and we have it for all 4 you see over there. And that's because we haven't yet consolidated our 10th grade social study classes. So we don't have those grades yet. Like I said, we're going to be getting them this coming Friday. But pretty consistent on what's been happening without having any consolidation affecting this class right here.
Thank you, Ms. Manukian. I'm going to hand it back to Mrs. Rains for a moment. She's going to talk about our student assistance program and some of the trends that we saw over the past couple of years.
Good, okay. All right, so as we said earlier, academics don't happen in isolation. We looked at the student assistance program or our SAP referrals. It's important for you to understand that a SAP referral is typically made because of, we call it BAHA, a behavior change, an attendance change, health, and that could be mental health or physical health change, and also your academic changes. And so what we did was we looked at the total number of SAP referrals that we had for the year, for the last 3 years, 2021, there were 118. Of that, 56 students had some form of academic concern in their referral. That doesn't mean that it was just an academic concern, but it meant academics were one of those components of the referral. In 21-22, we had 135 students that were referred to SAP. 22 of those students were in one of our advanced level 9th grade courses. So we looked at all the kids who was in 9th grade that had even just one. So it didn't have to be social studies and English. It could have just been the advanced level English course. There were 22 students. Of those 22 students, 10 students had academics as one of their concerns. So they could have had multiple concerns. It could have been their academics and their attendance, or it could have been the academics and their mental health. Of those 10 students, though, 3 of them were referred to SAP strictly because of an academic concern, and they were in an advanced level course. This past year, we had 102 students referred for SAP. 27 of those students were in one of our advanced level courses. Now you have to remember we now have 6 courses that are the advanced level, right? So it could be a 9th grader in either the advanced English or social studies, or math or science, or it could be a sophomore in our advanced English or social studies course. Of those 27 students, only 7 of them had academic concerns listed as one of their contributing factors for why they were referred to SAP. Of those students, only 3 were referred strictly for academics. To me, that says a lot. There's a big story behind that. Some of that story is about the work that our team is doing here at school to support our students. The differentiated instruction, the modifying of the lessons, the support with the push-ins and or the para, the communication with the case managers and the teachers about the appropriate accommodations and modifications is super important there. The dedication of our support staff in helping our students all feel like they're included in these classes, because that plays a contributing role in how they're going to be performing and whether they're then going to be referred to SAP. So there's always a narrative. It's not just a number that explains everything. And so what I'd like to do is share just a few of those narratives. I know we're short on time. I brought 4, but I'm going to share 2. So in the interviews that we had with students, one of the students that I talked to, the student was in 9th grade last year. They took an honors government class and got an A at the end of the year, and an English advanced class and got an A-. In 10th grade, this student took AP World History and got an A-, and took World Lit Honors and scored an A. So they moved from their advanced level class up to an honors level class in English and still were prepared enough to score an A for their end of the year. This student says, AP was hard, but it was a lesson and I don't regret it at all. Totally prepared me for the honors English. I was totally prepared for the honors English class. It felt easier at times. I kept my math and science classes at an advanced level because it gave me more time for the courses I enjoyed. I played 3 sports, enjoyed the relationships I had with my teachers, and it made me want to work harder. Student number 2, different scenario. This student in 9th grade, took Government Advanced and got a D+, took Advanced English and got a D-. In 10th grade, this student took World Advanced and got a D+, and took English Advanced and got a B-. The student was new to us in 9th grade. They were identified and supports were put in place. They made academics more of a focus this year. That's something that they're self-reflecting on. They talked to more of their teachers about how to get help. They sometimes used the lunch and learn. So their science and math grades went from a D+ and a C, respectively, in 9th grade to a C+ and a B- in 10th grade. The student was referred to SAP in 9th grade, but not in 10th grade. So there's a lot more to the picture of the students and how they're doing. And a lot of their comments during those interviews were about learning time management, learning how to take notes, creating relationships, finding friends, and finding other things that they had interests in as well.
So just to expand upon what Mrs. Rain said, looking at the findings and next steps for year 2, right? We know how hard our teachers are working and that they want to do the very best for our students. I think that one of the things that we want to remember, and to Mrs. Rain's point, is that we talk about skill and will, and that's something that continually came up with the teachers, right? We are giving them the skills, right? Our teachers are working hard to do that. The will has to come from within, right? Our teachers can do a number of things, many, many things, but they have to have that intrinsic motivation at some point, and that's something that we have to help them find in many ways. As they transition to 9th grade, talking about study skills, how to study, right? How to write notes. Those things are all new things as they come up to the high school, and that's something that we need to continue to focus on, and will become more of a focus in that 9th transition, right, as we're expanding that program. Additional professional development is needed for our teachers, and that's a result of what we heard from the department meetings when we met with them as administrators, right, that they want to be able to, get more in their toolbox in terms of differentiating instruction. Before we left for the year, we had the CCIU come in and meet with all of our core content teachers and provide them the opportunity to give feedback without administrators present or anybody else. So it was candid, right, and very honest about what they felt they needed moving forward. And the CCIU, in collaboration with us, will help to develop that plan for the teachers going into the next school year. And finally, communication. Again and again and again. Communication not just between teachers within a department, between departments, with administration, between central and the building, the communication within the team of teachers, right? Every teacher that has that student in class, the conversations that take place to figure out where the challenges are and where the successes are. And that means the students themselves hearing what they're thinking, because again, this is their education, and we need to hear what they need help with. Our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our special ed teachers that are pushing into these classes, and the parents as well. Looking at additional findings and steps for year 2, we continued to cluster students, right? We will continue to cluster students, and additional push and support by special ed teachers and paraprofessionals. We'll continue with that model next year. We will continue with the use of the MTSS process that has really come to light at the high school and has been very helpful in terms of determining what the additional supports the students need, whether that is academic, whether that's social, emotional, whatever the case is. Expand on those conversations with RMS, right, in support of those incoming freshmen. Lunch and Learn has been extremely helpful, especially in terms of being able to get that additional academic support, but we need to do a better job of targeting the kids that need to get that academic support, right? We know the kids will always come for help that don't necessarily need it. We want to make sure that, just like we did with the extended learning program, where we reached out and grabbed those kids that we knew needed it most, we need to do a better job of that with our Lunch and Learn program. And provide MTSS data to teachers so that we are all on the same page. In summary, right, as Dr. Dukevich said, this is not over, right? This is a continual learning process. Thank you. Some of the successes that we've seen is that supports diversity of peer interaction. Students are being challenged and supported in the way that we had hoped. There is collaboration within and between departments, which is always a wonderful thing. A nice byproduct of collapsing college prep levels is that some of the advanced classes have been able to get smaller than they were previously, which allows our teachers to give more individual attention to our students. More opportunities because there are less scheduling conflicts. We have more opportunities for our students in those advanced classes that need additional support to have room in their schedule for electives, which is lovely. Some of the challenges that we still have to face and tackle. The variety of student readiness. We have students coming in at different reading levels, especially in social studies where there are not replacement courses like in English, and students that are not homegrown from Radnor could come in at a 3rd grade reading level, and that's not something that we can fix overnight. Personalization of student programming and supports needs to continue at the level that it has been, and we really have done a phenomenal job, our teachers especially, at looking at the individual student and the resources and the support that they need. Finding those creative solutions to identify more time for our teachers to be able to talk, right? Time is always a big thing with our teachers, and finding that time for them to collaborate and really come up with ideas. Assessing and planning for challenges with prerequisite content and skills, especially for new students to RTSD, and that's a reflection of the developmental math class that Mrs. Rains was talking about before. And then finally, to continue to identify and refine the best methods to monitor student progress and what that looks like to use data points moving forward.
So I'd like to thank you very much for your time and this wonderful presentation, so informative, lots of very useful information in here. I'd just like to go around to the committee. Be mindful of time, but also I want you to be able to address your questions and comments. Ms. Duffy?
I'll cut to just one that, thanks for all your work, and it seems that I hear a lot of the fruits of the collaboration to really identify and support the students and the college prep transitioning to that advanced. I'm just curious, were we hearing from the teachers concerned that the original, the students who normally would take advanced, because I think there's a perception that there's a pretty big jump from advanced to honors in many courses at the school in terms of rigor. So they're just not quite there at the honors, but are you hearing concerns that we're not supporting them enough? Are we slowing down the pace too much? Are we not challenging them enough to kind of get them? I know you gave us, an anecdote of when someone was able to make that jump, but in general, you're hearing that from the teachers that they're feeling that those traditional advanced students are not getting challenged in terms of, meeting the needs of all learners.
Did you want to grab it?
It's up to you.
I'll jump first and then you can jump in. I think it's actually more of a concern from the teachers that they are keeping up the rigor and they worry about the students that need the additional support, which is where the additional professional development comes in terms of differentiated instruction. You know, when Ms. Manukian went through the data and looked at the enrollment, the percentages were really consistent, right? There weren't big jumps showing that flight to honors like we've heard. So I'm not concerned with that. I'm more concerned with making sure that, you know, we are making our teachers feel successful in terms of what they're doing, because I think they're very hard on themselves sometimes. They expect a lot, and, you know, they want to do right by the kids, and so that would be my concern.
Okay, that,
Did you? Oh,
No,
okay.
Ms. Raines, did you want to?
I'll leave it to other guys.
Anyone?
Light of time.
Well, I would just say that I would agree that our teachers really want to always continue to challenge our students. But if you look at the data, the students that are moving to the honors courses, they're still doing well overall, their grades. So it looks like not only just the one student anecdotally, right, that I interviewed, but our students that are taking that leap, they're doing well in those classes. So to me, that says that yes, they're still being prepared enough in order to be successful in an honors course if that's the appropriate level for them to be at.
Great. Mr. Moore?
So, thank you so much. I know that this is, first of all, thank you to all of the teachers who are the ones who had to implement this and the administrators who are supporting them. My experience in this area is more anecdotal, but there was a time when I was a teacher at a charter school in Philadelphia. Before I was a lawyer, I was a teacher. And we had a class that was a science class. And it was a science class that was designed to help students whose reading scores we were worried that they wouldn't be as successful in the traditional science class, physical science class. But the model was not working, and those students were essentially shut out of curriculum they otherwise would have had by being put into this class. And I was one of the teachers in this class. And my recommendation to the school was, we need to get rid of this class and find another way to have these students get the same kind of curriculum that's, you know, based on standards in physical science that they would have gotten if they had not been put into this class. And I was overruled at that time. But since it was a charter school and there was an opportunity to continue to work on this issue, you'd be careful what you ask for. I was given the opportunity to rewrite the curriculum for that class to show that the students could achieve with the more traditional physical science classroom curriculum. And then eventually the change happened in later years, after I had left the school. So I just wanted to I just want to thank everyone for seeing this through, because we're just starting this. We're at the very beginning of this process, and there will be a lot of growing pains. But giving teachers the development they need to really differentiate and see it through, I think will benefit us in the long run. And then the second piece of anecdotal support, and maybe a little bit of reimagining about how we think about this. We're talking so much about, what are the challenges of consolidating CP and advanced, but differentiation matters everywhere. And as a student at Radnor, this may be a little counterintuitive, but the two classes I took that both warranted the most differentiation and actually had the benefit of it because of the teachers in those programs were viewpoints and global issues. Those were classes where there were a great variety of students' past experiences, but then they ended up in those classes. They were looking for, I don't like putting this in terms of level, they were looking for a qualitatively different learning experience, and they were able to get that from the integrated classes. But those teachers, and I will name them to give them the shout out because they deserve it, Marilyn Heminger and John Dale and Jim Talone and Ken Sklar, they found a way to do it. And they were all master teachers. And I think had a lot of support from the administration as well. But in Radnor, everyone can teach with that level of success and flourishing if we're giving them enough support. So I just hope that we all continue to do that and see this through, so that as these consolidations continue, every teacher feels like they are empowered to give every student what they need, whoever it is walks in their door. Thanks.
I'm happy to see how this is working. I think it would have been helpful, and I apologize for not giving this feedback before, rather than to see pure enrollment numbers, to see percentages. And I think to everybody's point, it would have been helpful to see like what percentage is in integrated, what percentage, like just to kind of see it all broken out to understand where the enrollments were each year from a percentage standpoint, because the class that was in 10th grade in the fall of 2011, 2021 is a very small class. They got bigger apparently since then, but I mean, by my math, they were about 210 or 211 that year. So that's pretty small for Radnor at least. What also, you said there wasn't a big shift from the advanced to the honors. I actually secretly hoped there would be. And your anecdote, I think it's great that we see kids moving up. I think we need to challenge ourselves and say, did that kid, why were they ever in advanced? Should that student have been in honors from a freshman year? Because, and maybe there's a great, I earned something, I moved up treatment there, but maybe they missed a year being challenged in a way they were perfectly capable of, and did we miss that somewhere along the line? So I don't mean to leave that on a down note. When you go to, a couple of years ago, one of these school board meetings out in Hershey, there was a training about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and one of the complaints that a number of students had is nobody believed I could do more. I say that as somebody, my best friend in high school, the teacher didn't think she could do on AP history. Her parents didn't think she could do AP history. And I was like, why are you letting them tell you you're not smart? And she finished AP history and she ended up going into engineering. But the point was, you have to have somebody who believes in you. And I'm glad that student found that moving from 9th to 10th grade, it might have been nice for them. And maybe, I don't know the history. Maybe 9th grade wasn't a win, wasn't a chance for them. Yeah.
So historically, I was a guidance counselor at the middle school, and I can let you know that when we're doing course selection for high school, we really talk to the students about having that nice balance of challenge and success, and also thinking about the transition. So this student, it's not that she couldn't have taken, right? She chose not to. And that is something that, we talk about skill sets. Knowing that balance is a beautiful thing. And if our kids can come in and have that from the very beginning and then work their way up into more challenging courses and they feel like they understand how the school works, I think overall that really helps them. Sorry.
And if I may, I would lead into that, because as we think about these consolidations in students and their opportunity to find what will help them flourish in the moment, and Dr. Batchelor won't let me use the word tracks, we have sequences, but within the sequences, the more we have opportunities for on-ramps and off-ramps, maybe even, and I'm sorry to say this, not just at the end of a school year, during a school year, I think that, we can recognize things and give kids a chance to maybe find something they're not getting somewhere else and get that opportunity to flourish. That's a big part of this too.
Oh, that's great. I set a deadline in my head of 7:20, so I'm going to keep it pretty brief. But I think maybe a summary piece of feedback would be that, when I think about MTSS and I think about our belonging initiative, what I basically think about is that what we are doing in the district, I think, and a lot of credit goes to our district leadership and our teachers, is that we're trying to shift the mindset toward what I just, to anyone who might be wondering here, you might be seeing it, but I just want to kind of confirm it that, we're talking about a massive kind of mindset shift of, you have this type of student and they're identified at a certain age and they're on this trajectory and we need to kind of, meet the kid at that trajectory. It's not that simple. That we can empower staff and teachers and parents to kind of be a little more dynamic. I think that's what you're talking about, Mr. Moore. But I think MTSS is kind of a mindset, or the Belonging Through a Culture of Dignity is a mindset of trying to help meet kids where they are, trying to support them, trying to support their possibility development to develop. You talked about skill and will. I think they're related, right? The motivation can be very much affected by how much they're supported. So lots to say on that, but I think overall, again, this is a wonderful presentation. Thank you for your work. And I think, again, it just underlines the really important work that I think our tip of the hat to our administration for really supporting kids, to have options at different stages of the game. So.
I just want to jump in for 1 minute. I was remiss in not thanking Mrs. Raines for 2 years. This is a big lift,
Yeah.
and she has done a phenomenal job working with our teachers, our counselors, and everybody involved with the team. And to Ms. Manukian, who has, jumped on board along with us, they did a wonderful job putting all of this together, and I just want to give them a lot of thanks for that and credit.
Teamwork.
Teamwork, that's right.
Thank you again. Appreciate it. Back to Dr. Tukevich.
I would just echo Ms. Kevkis' words. Again, this team has been tremendous. There's a lot of work putting this together. Again, the context is year 2 of 5, and then to be continued thereafter. And to your point, Dr. Babson, we have a convergence of a lot of initiatives and activities. MTSS is one, belonging through a culture of dignity is another. This is just one thing as a layer together. Hopefully success begins to flourish. So it takes time. And it's really hard work, and our teachers are doing tremendous things. So it's just going to take time to see fruits of the labor. So thanks again to the high school team, and that's the conclusion of our presentation. So we'll see if we have any public comment.
Thank you very much. So do we have any on-site public comment? No? Okay, so with that, we're going to adjourn our meeting. Thanks very much.